Ladies and gentlemen, I have come here today to ask you this. Could such a masterpiece as Catch-22 have been written if Joseph Heller had not served in World War II? What would Crime and Punishment be like if Dostoevsky had not been exiled to Siberia? How would Game of Thrones be impacted if George R.R. Martin was less of a medieval fantasy fan, shall we say? Why am I asking you this? Well, it is because I want to stress to you this idea. The environment an author is exposed to is responsible for shaping the text that they create. But what of appropriations? Books, shows, plays, films, comics that take elements from classic texts and use it to shape their own plot. For appropriations, it is the environment of the creator that distinguishes it from its classical counterparts, reimagining or reframing the text, but never copying. Furthermore, the extent that appropriations develop our understandings of a classic's cultural values and concepts too depends entirely on this environment. The ability to connect cultural values and concepts of the past to a contemporary audience in an accessible manner is highly valuable. However, the influence of directors will always alter the core messages of the classical text. As a result, neglecting or changing certain concepts can speak for how cultural values have shifted since the release of the classic text. In Dracula, the view depicted is that religion, specifically Christianity, remains relevant regardless of the nature of God's existence and the development of science. This concept arises from the polarized views of religion in Victorian England, the environment in which Stoker wrote and released Dracula. At the time, society was going through great social upheaval, with the publication of Charles Darwin's theories ushering in a trend of rationalism. His theories challenged the teachings of Christianity, the religion of England at the time, from a scientific, factual basis, and many Englishmen rejected religion as a result, albeit initially to persecution. However, this induced many of those who remained religious to radicalize against Darwin and science itself. This debate influenced Stoker to create a sort of middle path in contradiction to his society's polarization, harnessing audiences from both sides of the debate by textually uniting religion with the modern, reason-based ideologies of Dracula's characters, proposing that religion could still exist in a rationalistic society. A primary aspect of Dracula promoting the relevance of religion is Stoker's presentation of the Christian church. In contrast to this historical period's view that the church was outdated and archaic, Stoker establishes it as wise and measured through recognizing Dracula's threat and facilitating methods to combat him and the vampires. This concept is primarily detectable in a scene where Van Helsing crumbles the Christian host outside Lucy's lair to trap the vampire. Through the nonchalant phrasing of this line, Van Helsing implies that the church has no issues with both providing him the host and an indulgence, that is, a Christian blessing, pardoning the punishment of sin. Host desecration is a significant Christian sin, and the fact that they overlook this and provide Van Helsing with the host outside of the context of a mass to use as a weapon against Dracula displays a rationality in the church unfamiliar to the Victorian audiences. So, Stoker presents religion as relevant through the presentation of the church as a knowledgeable institution and a positive force in the Dracula universe. The relevance of religion is also established through its influence over Dracula's protagonists. In chapter 17, Van Helsing persuades the protagonist to join him in slaying Dracula by implying that choosing not to would be an insult to God himself. So, rhetorical questions, metaphors, and hyperphora create this passage's persuasive tone and build it to become a climactic moment in the narrative arc. By writing Van Helsing to convince the protagonist primarily by evoking their Christian sense of duty, Stoker suggests that religion is ultimately what motivates people to do good. Stimulated by the social debate between religion and reason, Stoker's inclusion of these pro-religion ideas in Dracula can be taken as a sign of his support of religion coexisting within these rationalistic views that were emerging to be dominant at the time. Dracula is a classical text where the author's environment clearly influenced its creative direction. Castlevania, a 2017 battle fantasy appropriation of Dracula, discusses the relevance of religion in society and promotes a view on the topic more resonant to modern viewers. To us, its audience. In Castlevania, the view on the cultural value shifts, presenting religion still as relevant to the individual, however, ultimately harmful to communities. This change is a product of Warren Ellis, the writer of Castlevania and a strong advocate for atheism and humanism. His script captures the conflicting views on religion prevailing in society, through building the church as an antagonist, whilst inserting some of his own less commonly held personal takes. In the climax of the pilot episode of Castlevania, an innocent woman is burnt at the stake, believed by the Bishop of Grezit to be a witch. The community unites around her death, celebrating it in a scene used to vivify how a community's sense of justice is corrupted by religious interference. Backlighting the imposing Gothic architecture with the symbolic colour of red creates an insidious, intimidating atmosphere. When juxtaposed with the normal scenery and colouring of this area, these visual techniques signify to the audience that what is happening is unnatural, it's wrong. As the scene continues, staggered zoom is utilised to dramatically draw attention to the woman on the stake. In conjunction with the fire's symbolic placement in the centre of the city, the audience now gets the impression that this execution has become the heart of the city and its people itself. This is further exacerbated by pinhole lighting, which serves to group all viewers of the execution, including the key perpetrator, the bishop, together as a collective. These film techniques ultimately build the idea that this act defines the city and its people, and regardless of who ordered this violent punishment, they are all guilty of letting it happen. That being said, however, noting that it was indeed the bishop of the Christian church who was responsible for this execution brings to light the true message that Ellis seeks to push in this scene. The church's doctrines warp people's perspectives on good and bad, corrupting their morals and values. And what I haven't mentioned yet is the woman burning on the stake is in fact Dracula's wife, a strong, independent human who we've grown to love and admire throughout the episode. And in fact, it is her death that kickstarts Dracula's genocidal rampage throughout the show's setting. This cements Castlevania's church as a harmful institution to its society. In contrast to the church in Dracula, Castlevania's church brings nothing but harm to the community, whether it be through acts of outward oppression or covert acts of moral corruption. However, surprisingly, believing in religion itself is never critiqued in Castlevania, nor is any suggestion made that suggests God does not exist. In fact, even the most violently anti-religion character in the show, Trevor Belmont, references God's existence constantly, albeit in a slightly less than respectful way. Furthermore, God's existence is reasserted along with Ellis's criticism of the church in the Bishop of Grezit's death scene. As the bishop is being eaten by a demon, the camera cuts twice to stained glass window artwork of Jesus looking down to produce the effect that he is peacefully overlooking the scene. Supplementing it is an angelic chorus, symbolizing that the violent act of the bishop's death was in fact divine justice. But the strongest evidence for God's existence lies in the fact that religious artifacts such as holy water or wafers both hold the power to ward off and kill demons, representative of the unholy. So, where does this bizarre perspective come from? A perspective that asserts God exists yet villainizes the institution that are the key supporters of him. Where can its origins lie? Well, ladies and gentlemen, let me illustrate to you the environment in which this show was created. The environment of Warren Ellis and all of us in attendance here. The environment responsible for giving Castlevania its unique perspective. The 21st century. The 21st century has been marked by the decline of Christianity in both followers and reputation, which is a clear indicator as to why Ellis found it appropriate to take this anti-religion stance in adapting a classical text that, as I established, is markedly pro-religion. And as can be seen by all these statistics here, the number of functioning churches, the percentage of people who identify themselves as Christian, and the number of people who are going into religious occupations has greatly declined post-1970s. The reasons still being hotly debated today. Having too been exposed to this environment, The voice of Castlevania's potential audience could not be captured by simply replicating Stoker's perspective on the relevance of religion. Reframe, reimagine, but never copy. The theme of tonight's event is masterfully captured in how Ellis examines a prominent cultural value of Dracula, the importance of religion, under the framework of religious institutions being antagonists, drawing upon the voices of the skeptical, cynical, betrayed audience who find it all too relatable. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is the key as to why appropriations such as Castlevania are so valuable. Appropriations twist cultural values present in classical texts to represent environments that too have twisted away from the way they were when the classical texts were released. And by comparing appropriation texts with their classical counterparts, us, the audience, can gain a deeper understanding of how the ideals, values, and morals of society itself has changed over time.